Hello, I'm Vicki LaRoe with Modern Jewelry Creators. Thank you so much for selecting this video. This video is actually going to be one of our project tutorials, and generally our tutorials live in our members content area, so in a private members area for our paid membership, because our project tutorials are really the equivalent of a class where we show a jewelry design that we've made, and then the tutorial is how to make it beginning to end, right? So if you're not familiar, I used to own a big, beautiful bead store, and we taught tons of classes for almost 3 decades. And so now that it's 100% online, our tutorials are the equivalent of a full, online class. And so we'd like to deliver, that value in our members content area. But once in a while, the projects that I'm showing are fairly simple enough or not too complicated. There's not too many steps that I'm able to go ahead and put those on our public YouTube channel if they're not going to be, too terribly long. And so today is one of those tutorials, and that allows me to share it with more people and just get more techniques out there. So, which reminds me, before I get into it, if you're not subscribed already, you'd like to, please subscribe to the channel, like the video if you like it, and we'll get started. So if you are a regular subscriber or a customer or member of ours, then you may have seen previous video where I premiered our new crystal collection palettes. And so they're a little color palette here. I'm trying to show you the light. This is our Fall Fantasy palette, but I premiered 5 different color stories for Fall 2021, and they are gorgeous mixes of Swarovski crystal, Czech fire polish, Czech preciosa, and Chinese crystal in all the shapes in sizes like 2 to 5 millimeter, and then again each one in a really beautiful usable color palette. And also in that video, I shared the many different ways I use these palettes in different designs. So you could just, string them, this little wrap bracelet, and this is the same project, but it's either like one long strand necklace or it can be a wrap bracelet. So that's one way. But I also shared other designs where I tend to use them mostly when I need a little cluster of crystals for an earring or on top of a pendant or to hang off of a clasp. So I like to have these little palettes already mixed, and then I can just grab out a few crystals when I need some accents here and there. But there's tons of other designs you can do with them. We've done silk floats, right, where the crystal's just knotted on strands of silk, and so it's just a beautiful, color palette. And again, there's just tons of ways to use them. If you haven't checked out that video, I can link it below. But so, like I mentioned, I will make one of these kind of long strands, 30-inch strands, for each of the mixes, for each of the palettes, so that you can see, so the customer or the viewer can get a better idea of the color story. This is Lilac Sky. So you can get a better idea of the color story when it's kind of strung like this, more than you can an idea of when it's just in a package, right, like this. So you can see the color better, but also gives you an idea of quantity, because the 130-inch strand is one package, the equivalent of one package. There's a little over 200 beads in here that will string close to around 30 inches. So gives you an idea of the color and of the quantity that's available in the palette. And but I wanted to do a tutorial where I did show how to make these little single strands, and because we've made them using the professional finish on it. You can see that. I'll tip the camera down soon so you'll be able to see it. But our professional finish means I've used French wire on the ends and sterling crimps and crimp covers and a statement clasp and some little like dangles to accent it. and then it's all strung on beaded-on 19 strand beading wire. So if you're not familiar with our kits, I'm only using the best quality, right? There's no fishing line here, that kind of thing. Always in our kits and our projects, having the best quality, especially in your findings and stringing materials, makes all the difference, because you put all this time into your beautiful jewelry, and that's what holds it all together. So it's very important to really use the best quality you can for your string materials and findings and that. So sorry, that's a lot of side rant on there. And as of this filming, there's a few of each of these palettes still available on our website. And if you're watching this at a later date, there might be some new colors. I'm going to make new ones all the time. But there's also an add-on option that you can add on the stringing kit, the professional stringing kit, where they'll come with the beaded-on and the crimps and the your choice of statement clasp in silver or gold. And that's what you would use to string one of these strands, which is what I'm going to show you today. And so I'm going to tip the camera down in just a sec, but and then go through the color palettes real quick again. But in the interest of time, I'm going to show the beginning finish for the first part of the clasp with the proper way to secure the French wire and the crimp and the cover and all that. And then I'll show the stringing, because there's definitely important nuances when you're doing the crimping and the finishing for the closure to be successful. But there also is definitely a method to the madness when you're stringing more of a random, but there's no pattern to it, right? So it's just when it's just a mix of beads, there's no pattern. And there's definitely a good way to string it, or a better way to string it, where we'll get a nice balance throughout the entire strand. So that is what I'm going to show you today. So we'll do the beginning part of the clasp. I'm going to only string about 6 or 7 inches, maybe the equivalent of a bracelet, but so you can get the idea of the flow and how you would best string beads like this or a random pattern to get that balance. And then I'll do the finishing on the other end, which is almost just as important as the beginning side. And that way, this video isn't, over an hour long, and but you can still get the idea of how to do the entire thing. Okay, so like I mentioned, if you did order one of the kits, though, it does come with our style sheet, which has the full step-by-step instructions here with photos. So that's definitely nice to have handy. And then you also have the video, of course. And like I mentioned, we're using a beaded-on material, and it's definitely one of the best quality string materials you can use. I'm not going to go over too many details about that or the actual crimping techniques too much. I have a separate video I can link below that does walk through, very meticulously how to do all those crimps and everything if you need to learn those techniques. The tools, though, you'll need today is a crimping plier. Like I mentioned, you'll need a proper crimping plier. If you only have a flat plier, like a needle nose, it will work. It will just be really challenging for you, and it might not look as nice. But right, the crimping plier has 2 oval stations. When you close it, you can hold it up. There's 2 little stations that kind of look like lips, and this will give you a better crimp. Ideally, you have 2 different kinds of cutters. A very fine cutter, so whatever you're using to cut really fine wire or silk, something like that, as well as more of a heavy-duty cutter. And so whatever you're using for making your jewelry, that could be your better cutter. And then if you don't have a heavy-duty cutter, even something from the garage or a scissors, but we just don't want to use our good jewelry cutter to cut the beaded-on. You just need something a little bit heavier. And then later, when we do the little dangles off the clasp, then you need a round nose and a chain nose pliers to do those loops as well if you're going to do the dangles. Okay, so I wanted to walk kind of through all that really quickly before I tip the camera down. And let's see, I'm going to kind of scoot some of this. I'm going to take this off so I can show this beautiful palette. All right, and I'm going to take this off just for a second too. Like I mentioned, the kit, or these strands, are just about 30 inches. Mine are around 29, because depending on if you are going to wear it as a wrap bracelet, then the exact length that you need will be important, right? So you can get 4 like even wraps. If you're never going to wear it, you just don't like bracelets, you're only ever going to wear it as a single strand or to layer it like I did today, then the length is not maybe as important that it's that exact. But for a bracelet, we'll want to stop and measure as we get close. When you get to like that 26-inch place, we want to stop and see how close we are and how much more length you would need if you plan to wear it as a bracelet. Okie doke. I'm going to tip you down, so I'll see you in a while, and the rest of it we're going to do up close here on my hands and the beads and everything. So I'm going to tip this down. Sorry for adjusting all the technical stuff. I'm going to scoot the light a little bit closer maybe too and see if that helps. Okay, so just really quick, like I mentioned, I have 5 different crystal color palettes that came out for it this fall, that if you haven't seen them or if you're still interested in them, I just want to show them really quickly. Like I mentioned, this is the Lilac Sky. That's a beautiful color story of blues and violets and soft colors like that. This is our Opal Rose. That's more of our pinky tones and kind of crystals and dark plums. Very pretty. This is Smoke and Mirrors. So definitely more of a kind of black, gray crystal story. Very elegant, very, very pretty. The one I had on as a necklace is our Champagne and Cognac. So definitely more of kind of the warm bronze and honey tones kind of for fall. And then our special kind of limited edition one for the season was Fall Fantasy, which is this one that has just gorgeous olives and plum, and also deep magenta and deep oranges, and again golden colors. Just really just love it. It has just about every color in there, but it just really works beautifully as a fall color story, which is going to be the palette I'm actually going to work with today. And even though, as I mentioned, I'm only going to be doing about 6 inches of it or so, but if you have the palette, or something similar you want to use, the first thing I suggest is to sort it a little bit. So here's like my tray of all my findings and doodads that we're going to use as we go around and go through it. But I also it would encourage you to sort a little bit of the palette, not the whole thing, but just to sort out some of the smaller beads. So the mixture, like I mentioned before, is between like 2 and 5 millimeter. So you have a lot of 4 millimeter, which will get the larger beads. There won't be too many 5s, but the 4 millimeter is a bit larger bead, and then the 2 was the smallest one. You're going to need a lot of that 2 millimeter. It's that small bead that really helps break up the larger ones, and so I think it helps to just go ahead and pull out a couple little groupings of it. So I pulled out some 2 millimeters in light colors and in dark colors. That's all. And then I made a little grouping of bicones, which is just a different shape. And I made a little grouping of metallics. And then each of our stringing kits also include spacer, like actual metal spacer beads in the silver or gold. So I have those off to the side as well. And this just makes it easier for you to find them when you need them, which will be quite often. Okay, so we're going to start with your bead-along. And like I mentioned, this is a 19 strand beetle on, and the one I'm using here is in the gold color. Most often there, and I'm just using a small piece, obviously, but the most common is a color called Bright. It's stainless steel, kind of silver color. I am using the gold colored one. They come in a lot of different metal colors that you can use. But since this is going to be covered almost the entire thing, the color doesn't really matter, at all. So you could use any of them. So what we do need to start with, though, so you've got your string, is your little piece of French wire. And French wire comes in normally like a little box like this, and you might have a whole little package of it, or it might be in a package. You always want to be really gentle with it. It's pretty fragile stuff, especially depending on whether you're using actual gold or silver. We're not. We're using plated over brass. There's no nickel or lead or anything in it. But you still want to be really gentle with it. And our kits include an inch of it, or you want to cut off an inch of it. And what you want to do with that inch is just cut it in half. And so this is definitely where you want to use your really fine cutters. It's really important to get a very clean cut with this. And you can just put it in front of a ruler and kind of cut the half-inch point, or you could eye it. And cut it really clean. Then I'm going to put both of them together and kind of match them up. And I almost never get them both the same length. And they don't have to be perfect, but close is better than not. And you don't necessarily need that full inch anyway. So one of these is a little bit longer. I'm going to trim that down. So another reason why you want a really sharp, beautiful cutters to cut that. So I have a little spare piece here I can waste. I hope you can see it. So we want to be gentle when we're working with it, because French wire can squish and it can pull. So I know it's maybe hard to see, but right, if I'm too late, if I'm not fragile with it, it pulls out like this and gets all messed up, right? And once it's like that, you can't use it. I have to throw that away. So you want to be pretty gentle with her. So I've got my first piece of French wire, and I'm going to start with one side of the clasp, doesn't matter which side, and you'll need a sterling crimp tube. You'll need sterling or 14 karat. Because I'm covering the crimp tube, I always use sterling, and then I'm going to cover it in a gold plated crimp cover. This I'll share. I'll go into it. You don't want to ever use plated metal crimp tube or crimp bead. It will say on the package, it has to by law say what it's made out of. If it's not marked sterling or even sterling filled, don't use it. Yes, sterling's a little bit more expensive, but there's a very good reason. A crimp needs to be very soft and malleable to be able to do its job. And ones that are plated or stainless steel are too hard to crimp nicely for you. So, like I mentioned, I'm not going to necessarily walk through all the techniques today, but it's very important. So, crimp tube on first, the French wire, right, strings on. Just trying to hold it more in the light so you can see it better. I can move my hand around so you can see it. Then whatever end of the clasp you want to use, and then the wire goes back down through the crimp tube. And then you're going to very gently finesse that and pull that crimp tube down to the French wire so that the French wire is covering your little loop of beetle on. So you don't see that, the wire, right? The French wire covers that loop. It's very beautiful. But sometimes it just takes a little bit of playing. And then our tail here, we don't want that more than an inch long or so, because you're going to lose that length. So however long, I mean, you don't have to get crazy with making it super short, but make sure it's not too long either, because then you're just wasting that, because we're going to cut it. So we're going to take our crimping plier, and sorry, I'm trying to do a lot of this away from me so you can see it, but I also have to see what I'm doing. Crimp once, turn her, and crimp again. Sorry, I have to be able to see it close up. There we go. And we're crimped. Then you're going to use your heavier cutter to cut that tail off. You never want to keep a tail or tuck it back down or any old wives' tails like that. You want to cut that baby off. When you have a good crimp on there, which if you use sterling crimp tube and a good proper crimper, this isn't going anywhere. You've done the job. You don't need that tail of wire. Our next step is to put the crimp cover over her. You can technically attach these later, but it's really easier to attach it now. And if you're not sure exactly what I'm talking about, it's easy to miss, right? You'll see on this one that, right, we cover it. So you don't see that little crimp, because sometimes it doesn't look that great. You know, if we just smash it up or something, the crimp doesn't always look that pretty. So a cover is a good way to hide that. But also when I'm using gold, I could have used a 14 karat gold crimp tube. That would have given me that same beautiful malleability and that softness to the metal to crimp, but it's about 5 times more expensive than sterling. So if I'm going to use a cover anyway, then I might as well use sterling. I'm going to cover it. And I'm also using a plated crimp cover. You can use sterling or gold. They're a lot softer, and so you would do the same technique, but you'd be really gentle with it because it smashes. But I'm using a plated one. Again, no nickel or lead. These are all made in USA, very good quality. Right, it's hard to show it here, but right, that crimp cover goes in the top station of the crimping plier with the open side up, and then you're going to lay the crimp tube in there perpendicular, and then give it a little squeeze right around. And normally that first squeeze can be a little cattywampus, but once you have that first squeeze or that first crimp on there, then you can go in and play with it a little bit. You're going to turn it, so you crimped it to close it, and then you're going to turn it and crimp it again on the seam. And see how even mine aren't perfectly even with each other? Right, so when you crimp that around, right, sometimes when you crimp it around, it goes like kind of like this, so instead of perfectly like, that's okay. Then turn the crimping plier and crimp on this seam. And when you give a little push on that seam, even if it's like this, it will kind of work its way back together. And you can just gently finesse her until it's covered all the way around the crimp tube. And then she is ready to go. Like I said, you could put it on afterwards, but I just think it's easier to put it on now without the beads on it. It's much easier to do. I need a new board. I need to bleach this up or something. Never noticed the stains on it until the light is on it. Okie doke. Now we're going to start stringing. And I can't see what time I'm at. 23. Hi. I am just checking the time. Okay. So here's the thing. When we're stringing these, I'm going to, right from the crimp tube, I'm going to taper up in size. So I'm going to start with a 2 millimeter, one of the smaller beads. Sorry, I've got to be able to see it. And then I'm going to add a little 3 millimeter okay, and another bicone or 4. So I've just tapered up in size here from a 2, 3, and 4 to get going. Now, here's really the only thing you need to remember. Oh, let me go back to my little tray here for a sec. So the important things you want to know, obviously different colors and sizes, but also finishes, right? So a bead that is completely transparent is transparent, right? We see through it. Let me get some bigger ones. A bead that is opaque, right, here's a little larger one. Here's a little orange one. It's completely opaque. This one is transparent. That one is opaque. This is opal. It's an opal color, right? So it looks a little opaque, but it really has a kind of a milky color to it. Here is a metallic bead. So it's completely covered in like a metallized color. This one's a bronzy color, but I have gold ones too. On some of my bicones, I may have what's called an AB finish. So it's a transparent, but then one side of it has an aurora borealis or a little AB coating is what it's called. Here's a like yellow one that has that too. So, and then that's about all of them. Some of them have, half metallics. That's a half metallic, where metallic's just on half the bead. This one has a gold lining. So, but it is important to note not just the different sizes, shapes, colors, but also finishes. And the reason is because as you're stringing all these, really the only thing that's important, one of the only thing that's important, is as you're stringing, you only need to make sure the next bead you string on is different than the last bead. Different shape, different size, different color, and different finish. All of it. Now, it could possibly be the same shape if it needed to, if it was then a different size also. But another thing is that this is where we want to use those 2 millimeters in between the larger beads. Otherwise, we end up stringing all the large ones together. So this was a brownish, transparent bicone. Then I used a little purple, kind of opal-y looking 2 millimeter. I'm going to use a transparent, kind of peachy crystal in a round. All right, so this is where separating the light and darks were important. Right, so I need another 2 millimeter, and I need a dark color. I'm going to use a dark brown. And a 2. Now, I need a larger bead, and it needs to be a lighter color. It can be a different shape. Let's go. And I'm going to use a bicone. Right, there we go. Now, I don't like these like purple ones almost mirroring each side of this peachy. You do you, but I don't like that. So I take that off. I'm going to then use a different color. Here's a little greeny one. That's better. Now I'm not going to use green as that bicone. I'll use this fire polish purple. Then I need a light color, 2 millimeter. I'll just use this champagne. And I've explained in other videos, or when I was premiering this these collections, that when I make these mixes, I don't just like scoop it into a bag. I purposely sit and count out to make sure you have the 200, and then I throw in a bunch more. But I purposely make sure it's the right ratio of 2s, 3s, 4s, bicones, rondelles, fire polish, etc. So I mentioned before that there's metal little spacers in there. There's no right or wrong on when you add that on. So I just added every inch or so. I didn't like it right there, so I'm going to wait on her. That's one. Let me do a little brownie one. This one's kind of a purpley. But by going like big, small, and doing the different finishes, you get a nice balance to them. And I don't ever string this fast. I normally go pretty slow. I mean, it's slow, but I take my time because it's fun and relaxing. Went first. But secondly, so that, you know, I make sure that I like, now those are the same size and shape. So off she comes. Need a lighter. Do a lighter in an opaque color. Let's do 4mm in the opal, and this is around 3mm gold. Let's do dark brown. Now, another thing, if you're using, for this palette, for example, there's a couple kind of bright accent beads. There's a magenta in here and an orange that are gorgeous. But in the mixes, there's about like 6 of them, I guess 6 each or so. And so if you want to use them, we make sure we space them out. We don't use them all up right in the beginning, right? Because then we run out of them. So that's kind of maybe one of the things you want to put off to the side and make sure, you know, you're only using it every so often. Green. So all you have to do, don't sit and stress and think about the entire thing. Don't lay all the beads out in order. That's crazy. Just think about the last bead you put on. If you don't like it, take it off. And just make sure the last bead you put on, or the next bead you put on, goes with it. That's all we have to think about. Do I like the next bead? Is that going to work with what I'm doing? I do try to be cognizant of that. I don't like I mentioned, things to kind of mirror as far as, you know, size and color. But you take your time and just make sure you like the way everything is looking, you know. And if you don't, we just take it off and put something else on. Right, so I'm trying to look for like a little bicone or something. There we go. And I'll do this little opaque because that bicone was kind of metallic. And then that was kind of light, so I'll do a dark, tiny one. Then I could use a nice big transparent, would be nice, of some sort. Here's a champagne-y one. And then Oh, that orange would be the same size. Let's get, oh, I have these pretty metallic ones too. That's gorgeous. It's in there. And could do a little purple. Then maybe the orange fire polish, because that's a nice different shape on there. And do a little champagne. That's why with these mixes you need a lot of kind of almost neutral, you know, colors in a way. There's that, and then I get another metallic in there. I'm going to do a little smaller bicone. Okay, so I'm going to try to string up just a couple more inches and finish off the other side for you, because I'm sure you kind of get the idea. But otherwise, so it's, you know, small, big, small, big, small, big, small, big, alternating, changing colors and finishes the entire way. I promise if you aren't like conscientious of doing this, you'll string all the big ones together and they'll look funky. You really want to make sure, take your time. And get all the colors, you know, that you want to use, and all the, you know, shapes and sizes. Let's do purple one. Okay. Checking the time. Okay, so 10 minutes of like stringing, and this was super fast. It's a long time to watch someone string, but and it may not look like that exciting, you know, now, but it's gorgeous, you know, once the whole thing is strung. We make a beautiful finished piece like that. Okie doke. So I'm going to make the world's tiniest bracelet here and taper these down. So when we are at the length, and like I mentioned, if you're going to do a wrap bracelet, if you do want to be able to wear it wrapped, I wrap mine 4 times. They need to be about like roughly 28 to 30 inches, of course, depending on your wrist size. You want them to be a little bit larger than you might think. It's not just 7 inches times 4. I guess it is 28. But that when it's wrapped like that, you have a little more room with it. But so you can put a bead stopper on the end and kind of measure around your wrist, you know, and see how close it is, and realize that the other side of the clasp will take up, you know, a good 1/2 inch, maybe a little bit more, when you do the finishing on it. And it's definitely better to have it slightly bigger than slightly smaller, because the extra length you'll be able to kind of space out over the 4 wraps, you know what I mean? Like you've got 4 strands there to kind of eat up any extra length that might be there. Unlike, you know, a single strand bracelet or necklace or something. Okay, so we taper down in size and we get to our other end here, and we're just going to finish off in the opposite direction that we did before. So I'm going to put on my Crimp tube, right? Crimp tube, the other side of our French wire. Come on. the other side of our clasp. And then the wire goes back down through the French wire. And you're going to finesse that French wire. If we just pull, and it's not just going to necessarily move and cover on its own. If you just pull real hard, you could squish it. You can just pull on it and the French wire will just squish on itself. So you've got to be real gentle. But once it's pulled down, right, and it's covering that beetle on. Now here's the most important thing before you crimp this, especially with a single strand, something that's long like this, or normally long. We want to make sure that it's not pulled super tight. So what I mean is, I'm going to wiggle this loose and make sure I've got space here. It's hard to do on camera, but that between the crimp tube and the first bead, that there is enough room for like 1 or 2 beads of room. We need that extra string. So you may think, oh, I'm not getting it close enough. No, you really need that, because especially, again, if you're going to wear it as a wrap bracelet, it needs to have that extra room on the string for the beads to move. Once you start to wrap it, there's nowhere for the beads to go. So you have to have a little bit of space, and I like to leave like 2 beads worth of space, or almost a quarter, not quite a quarter inch, just under. So it's about 4 millimeters of space. But you want to make sure you've got that little bit of space there. I think you can see, right? And then crimp that side, and then put the crimp cover on all the same way as I did in the beginning one. I'm not going to do it, so I'm not ruining all these crimp ends and things here. So I'm not destroying so many crimp tubes and things. So, right, we're going to crimp that down, cut the tail, again, real close to it, and put the crimp cover over it, just like we did the first side. And then if you decide to do, if you want some little dangles, or like, because if you did one of our kits, then it comes with the little beads and head pins to do some dangles there. So those are just done on our little ball head pins, right? And just select 2 or 3, or however many you want to do. I use normally the larger, the 4 millimeter beads. We'd string those on there, and I have a little, and just do a basic loop, right? So that's when you're going to need your round nose pliers and your chain nose, is to make a basic loop with her. Now, let me use actually a little different one. I'll do that opal. So one thing I want to point out with these, if you're doing these dangles specifically for this type of clasp, it does need to be a bit of a larger loop than you might be used to leaving, because of how thick that the clasp is. So when I am making just a basic loop off my head pin, I just eye it, but I normally leave, it's probably just a little under a half inch. But for this particular loop, we really want to make sure it's a good half inch of wire. So to me, it looks, gosh, that looks huge or long. And you can always cut it down, of course, too. So having it be too big is not the biggest thing in the world, but it does need to be fairly long so that you get a good loop out of it. So you're going to also then use the fatter part of the plier so that we get a good size loop with her. Right, and that way it can easily hook on there because it's large enough. See, anything smaller wouldn't have worked. So you've got to look at how large, the particular finding you are attaching it to. But that is basically it. And again, if you had purchased the kit, the string kit, then you'd have the instructions. But now here's a little video tutorial to kind of help go with it. Whoopsie. I'm gonna scoot this back up. Oh, I'm gonna scoot the light out of the way. I'm like, what is that? So I move the light closer. Okay. Sorry, I'm scooting everything around. Excellent. So see, that's how long tutorials are. Normally anywhere from like an hour and a half. So even this simple one was 45 minutes. But simple it still is. And so at least you've got the info there. I will link everything below. And thank you if you joined me this long through the video. I appreciate you hanging out with me and checking all this out. And hopefully this helps or give you some inspiration, something like that. And I will see you back next time. And until then, sparkle brightly like the star that you are. Peace.